have decided to do my inquiry project on intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. During my first year of teaching, I really struggled with the concept of motivation and what really motivated students. Um, and as I struggled with motivation, a lot of teachers would come and share their expertise or suggestions on what would motivate students. And a lot of the time, I would get these suggestions that didn't really sit right with me. I was getting suggestions on class dojo or class points or pizza parties or all of these reward systems. My school does an entire reward system, giving kids paper money. And none of this really sat right with me. As I would implement all these suggestions, and class dojo would work for a week, and then it would fade out, or a pizza party would motivate kids for a week and it would fade out again. And so, what really would stick with students as I was trying to seek out what motivated them and how to really internalize that motivation. And so, my paper, my inquiry discovery is on extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation, and really digging deep more specifically into intrinsic motivation and the research behind it, and what it truly means, and how it's related in the classroom. And so I wanted to find ways to implement strategies, how to intrinsically motivate students. And when other teachers are in my situation where we have an extrinsic motivation requirement at my school. And so within the classroom, how am I specifically going to intrinsically motivate my students is my burning question. Is it possible to blend the two together, or do we really need to specifically just focus on intrinsically motivating students? What are the effects that intrinsic motivation has on these students, on their classwork and discovery, and within my realm of mathematics? When we look at math tasks, what motivates them? What gets them to where they want to learn more on their own? And so that's what my burning question is with intrinsic motivation, where I'm coming from with motivating students. So, as stated before, when researching this, I really wanted to focus specifically on intrinsic motivation, and some research and studies that have been done on students and people and the effects that intrinsic motivation has had on their decisions. And one of the main studies that I found was by a professor at Yale Business School. Her name is Amy Zesniewski, and she does this incredible study on cadets at West Point, and she looks really in depth as to why they are going through this very difficult task of graduating at West Point. She talks about how it takes a lot of grit and hard work to succeed and achieve goals at West Point. And so she really goes into the effects and the types of motivation that she has, or that these cadets have. So she looks at cadets who have expressed intrinsic motivation as far as the hard work that they do at West Point and the internal motivations that they have. And she compares them to the success that cadets who have extrinsic motivation, maybe that's getting paid more by going to this type of college, or being able to be an officer when you graduate. And so she goes into these achievement differences between these cadets that have intrinsic motivations and cadets that have extrinsic motivations. And what she found was that cadets who were intrinsically motivated far out-achieved the cadets who were extrinsically motivated. The cadets who were intrinsically motivated reached their goals, surpassed their goals, and went further within the military than cadets who had expressed extrinsic motivations. And so this was a major study done by the Yale School of Business, and they really tie it back into the education system to, students who do well in class, who do well in education, are students who are intrinsically motivated. They're going to achieve more than students who are extrinsically motivated. And this is supported by another guru within what I found as within the intrinsic motivation research was Carl Hayward. He really talked about students with disabilities and how extrinsic motivators came from this idea that students with disabilities need external rewards to help push them through more difficult content. And what he found was very similar, where these students performed better when they were intrinsically motivated, even the students who had disabilities. And many other scholars agreed, believing that children with disabilities benefit more from intrinsic motivation rather than reward systems that are being showcased by schools. And he actually found that these children tend to work longer and harder on tasks than students who are extrinsically motivated. He also did a study on IQ tests and IQ points, and his research suggests that intrinsic motivation can make a difference in school achievement as large of a connection with kids making 20 to 25 IQ points higher than students who are extrinsically motivated. So to recap that, because it was a little confusing, students who are intrinsically motivated are more likely to score about 20 to 25 points higher on an IQ test. And Carl Hayward, who's this guru with the really justifying why students with disabilities need to be intrinsically motivated, also found that intrinsically motivated students do much better on IQ tests. And the last guru that I really found focused more inward on the teacher, and her name was Lori Valerie, and she found that teachers need to deliver content in a very passionate way. She talked about teachers being passionate in their content and how that overflows into the classroom, and is a model for how teachers are intrinsically motivated to teach, and that carries over into student motivation. I found that really fascinating, and reflectively thought about my own teaching and how am I passionate about every day that I walk into the classroom, and how am I pushing out this passion and modeling that for students. And she really talks about grabbing the attention of students and pushing them to be intrinsically motivated to discover their own learning. And so a couple different light bulbs went off when I was doing this research. And the first one came from the Yale School of Business study on cadets. They found that intrinsically motivated cadets outperformed cadets who had a mixed blend of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. That really intrinsic motivation and solely intrinsic motivation is what gives greater achievement. That was the first. The second was a study done by St. Xavier University students, and they observed student goals, and they found that 37% on average student goals are intrinsically motivated. and that's only 37%. The rest are all extrinsically motivated. And I never really even thought to dive deep into what my students' goals were, if they were intrinsic or extrinsic. And so that's definitely a light bulb that went off, that I can see which students from the get-go, from the start of the year, are intrinsically motivated just by what their goals are. And then the other light bulb was just Carl Hayward really saying all kids benefit from intrinsic motivation, not just higher order kids or the medium kids, but all kids, even down to kids with special needs and disabilities, are going to benefit greater with intrinsic motivation. And so really cool studies and a lot of ideas that I never really even thought of until this research. So 3 best practices that can be implemented to increase intrinsic motivation. Number 1, which is supported by Valerio on Teacher Passion, is learn your content and become passionate of it. So that way when you lesson plan, when you create tasks and activities, that is coming out of your passion, and it is going to be easier for you to model that passion, and that will carry over into your students, and they'll be able to see you as a teacher being intrinsically motivated. The second thing is to give assignments or inquiry tasks free of grading. A lot of the research I showed really supported that grading and achieving grades is a form of external achievement and motivation, rewards, which is extrinsically motivating. And that's not what this research is suggesting gives greater achievement. So giving these tasks that are free of grading allows for more risk, allows for mistakes, and true learning from those mistakes can take place. Because grading is seen as a form of external motivation. And I think as teachers, we really see that when kids are doing work and they want to know if they got it right because they want to know what their grade is, and they're concerned with getting that A. The third thing is giving kids purpose. Again, supported by Valerio. She believes giving kids purposeful and relevant material will give intentional planning, and knowing the passions of your students will allow them to achieve greater within their assignments. So becoming passionate about your content, giving meaningful and relevant assignments that are free of grading, and giving your students purpose are 3 practices that you can give to give extrinsic motivation within your classroom. So in conclusion, we as teachers need to be intrinsically motivating our students. And that can be difficult if you're in a classroom like mine, where we are told so many times to extrinsically motivate kids. And so for me, I started this project. My burning question came from the fact that all these teachers were giving me all these extrinsic ideas, and I tried them and they just didn't work out. And so hopefully when new teachers come to the building, I am able to maybe suggest different strategies to intrinsically motivate some students and see the effects that that can have in a classroom. And it's unfortunate that my school and some schools like mine, have so many extrinsic factors that come into play, because it really does kind of contradict the research done within the Yale School of Business Study on cadets, proving that we really shouldn't have mixed motivations. We need to be fully and completely intrinsic motivators, and be motivating within internally ourselves. But ultimately, I want students connect with math and understand the relevance to their life. And I want them to be able to struggle and to be able to make mistakes and not worry about whether or not this is going to affect their grade. I want them to take ownership of their learning, and I want them to take this discovery process seriously. And I want them to enjoy school and enjoy learning and enjoy the inquiry process and the adventure that education really can be. And so that's my hope with these strategies and doing this research on intrinsic motivation. And so I hope that these strategies are practical for all teachers and that we can be passionate about what we're teaching and we can become passionate about what our students are learning and we can understand and know our students and know their passions and create these engaging lessons where students are making real connections and real progress in the discovery of our content. And so intrinsically motivating our students is key. And that's going to be my focus this year and hopefully be able to make those suggestions to teachers when discussing what motivates our kids.